Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. This is Darren with Komprise. Our focus is on smart data migration for file and object data. Files time has come for the cloud, but the wrong moves can cost you millions. So I'm here with my colleague Steve. Let's just say hi, Steve. Let's go
In
IRL in
real
real
life.
life
Hey,
and
good to
hi
see
to the
you.
people. Hi. I've got my Golden State shirt on. It's a big day for the
Very
Warriors, so
nice.
apologies if you're not a Warriors fan. But yeah, so Steve, the agenda we have today, it's really a hot topic of cloud, data migration, smart data migration and management. We're actually kicking off a series. So today you're going to be our featured guest. I'll let you introduce yourself. In a couple of weeks, we've got Ben Henry, a customer success architect, who's going to dive deep into preparing for file and object data migration. And then Krishna, our CTO, our COO and co-founder, is going to talk about the benefits of cloud native access. So Steve, why don't I just tell us who you are, a little bit about your background before we dive into this topic of smart data migration.
Yeah. So Steve Perchinsky, I'm Director of Product Marketing here at Komprise. I've been in the storage industry a really long time, right? So well over 20 years. My last stint was at NetApp. And since I've been at Komprise, I've had the opportunity to work with, amazing, cloud vendors like Amazon and Azure, as well as, enterprise storage vendors, right? So it's been a really interesting job. And I've got to see a lot of our customers do amazing things with data and storage here. And that's been really just a valuable experience.
Awesome. So let's jump into the topic. I mean, I'll just throw a few stats at you. We recently published a blog that tried to compile a lot of the interesting data that's happening in the world. I mean, there's this data point's been used a lot about data volume growth from 70 zettabytes to 175 zettabytes by 2025. And you can see on the right that the majority of this data is actually unstructured data. So the data that does not easily fit into rows and columns or into relational databases. Cybersecurity Ventures published an interesting research report that said the majority of this data by 2025 will actually be in the cloud. And then the Flexera State of the Cloud report said that 93% of organizations, enterprise organizations, have adopted multi-cloud. So it sounds great. This is really happening. It's not a new topic, cloud migration, cloud acceleration, but the challenges are also very real. Right. So there's lots of interesting data points about IT organizations really not being able to handle the future data demands, or that they're unable to realize the benefits of data. And then unlike this point from Forrester, that organizations that do take a data-driven approach to decision making will grow more than 30% annually. So you can visit the Komprise blog to dig into those data points. But let's get specifically to this topic of file and object data migration. So file data, it can be petabytes of data, billions of files. And migrating this much data to the cloud takes time and can be disruptive. So what we want to really focus on today is do you know your options? Are you thinking about this from a data-centric perspective, or are you kind of leaning on your current storage-centric approach? Are you looking at free tools or point tools versus a platform? Lift and shift versus tier and archive before you migrate? And then once you're thinking about cloud migration, which tier, which cloud, which approach? So I want to ask you a couple of questions, Steve, kind of bring you into the discussion.
Sure.
So what's changed with cloud migration? I mean, migration is not a new topic in the world of storage, but what's so different about migrating to the cloud?
I think it's one that people are ready, but it's really about all the options in the cloud. So if you look at the way storage migrations were done in the past, it was very storage centric, right? I've got an old storage system. I've kept it for 3 to 5 years. I've now bought a new box, and I'm going to move to that. And there was a lot of kind of compromises, right? That monolithic array was never going to be right for all of the different workloads you had to put on it. So what the cloud represents, though, is the ability to pick individual workloads and then pick the exact right storage or data resource for that. So I can be much more granular. And the rate of innovation in the cloud is the other thing that's happening. I mean, you look at Amazon FSxN that was introduced last fall, and they continue to add more features to it even now. So it's that rate of innovation that customers now need to be more agile with their data so they can take advantage of it. I think it's where customers, the kind of things that happened in the past, where customers have essentially tried to recreate their on-premises storage environment in the cloud, is where people have gotten disillusioned with it. But this new notion of doing like a data-centric approach really lets you be agile and lets you take advantage of the cloud, both from a cost perspective, performance, as well as things like AI and analytics, right? You just get more from your data.
That makes sense. And you mentioned FSX from Amazon. So my other question before we get into smart data migration is, why is file data migration to the cloud such a hot topic today? Like what's changed in the last year and a half?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? I mean, file has been in the cloud for quite a long time now, but I think it's really about the maturity of the offerings from Azure, from Amazon, and then if you look at things like Amazon or FSXN from ONTAP, right? That is that same NetApp experience that they had on-prem in the cloud. Also offerings from partners like Cumula, right? So the offerings are really mature. Customers now see that they can consume and use file in the cloud without all the hassle of taking care of failed hard drives or patching, right? They just get to consume it as a service. So I think the technology is ready, and then the second part is that customers are ready. I think coming out of the pandemic, they've started consuming more and more cloud services, and they're looking at that old array on-prem and seeing how expensive it is and how much power it consumes, and they know that they can have a much more much more efficiencies in the cloud with a much better experience. So I think it's kind of those two things, right? The technology's right, and people are ready now.
That makes sense. Yeah. Also, I think you mentioned the innovation, the pace of innovation,
Yeah.
but also what you can do with your data once it's in the cloud. All these, cloud services. We use the term AI-ready data, right? Feeding these algorithms and getting better analytics out of data once it's in the cloud, not just storing it more cheaply, in one of these tiers.
That's a great point.
So really quick on Komprise. Many of you on today's call know about who we are and what we do. For many of you, this might be a new vendor, a new approach to think about. So the key thing to note about Komprise is we take a platform-centric approach. And there's other content and webinars we've done around elements of our platform. We call it the Komprise Intelligent Data Management Platform. From a grid architecture, a global file index, some of the things you'll see in the demonstration of how we move data transparently, to being able to set these policy-based automation systems up, to the different use cases, everything from analyzing to tagging, mobilizing, confine, delete, execute. Today, we're going to focus on the top left, smart data migration. Many organizations know us for the second, which is transparent data tiering. And then recently we announced smart data workflows, which you can learn about on our website. So I just wanted to introduce you to this platform of approach that we're taking to data management and data mobility, many use cases, and many of our customers do start with migration. So Steve, how do you define smart data migration?
So for me, I think it's the ability to start with your data first, right? So the first thing we do is to analyze data. So again, we're getting away from that old storage centric way of I've got 100 terabyte volume here and I want to move it over there. It's now the ability to drill into your data, to understand what it is, what the needs are. Is it does it need high performance storage? Is it less performant? Kind of put it on something that doesn't need that much performance. And the other part is, again, what you're mentioning is the ability to drive value out of my data. Which of my data sets could I run analytics against, or AI/ML workflows? So it's that ability to start first with your data and then move it to the exact right place versus these big monolithic shifts. It's much more agile. It's this agility that really lines up with the technology in the cloud, right? So I think these two things kind of really come together well. We're going to look at cold data. We're not going to put that on high performance. We're able to move that off to lower tiers and save you some kind of money. And again, it's just that whole notion of agility, right? That's the difference with the cloud. New features are coming out all the time. I think in the past, customers would do things like you'd move to a storage platform, and then you'd see a new feature come out somewhere else and kind of have that kind of buyer's remorse. With smart data migration and the cloud, you should be able to pivot to move the right data to the right place whenever you need to.
That makes a lot of sense. I know one of our customers refer to it as file sprawl, and this concept of data mobility, being able to very quickly adjust and pick the right underlying platform. That's also the benefit of having a data-centric data management platform in place to shield you from some of that underlying change that we know is inevitable. So let's jump into the demonstration. Do you want to just walk through what we're going to see here before we jump in, or do you want to come back to this?
Absolutely. So this is, again, an example from Amazon, but it's going to be the same whether you choose Azure or another cloud. And what we're showing here is our architecture. So on the left, we've got, kind of your legacy or on-premises. Again, it doesn't have to be legacy. You can absolutely do a hybrid cloud workflow. We have a lot of customers that do operate both on-prem and in the hyperscalers. We're going to deploy our Komprise Director that's run as a fully managed service in the Komprise VPC. So You just, literally log onto a web UI, and I'm going to show you that next. And then we deploy what we call the Komprise grid, right, or our data movers adjacent to that data. So in this case, you can see we've got some for our legacy on-prem storage. We're analyzing that data. We're moving hot data, in this case, to high performance FSXN, and we're moving that cooler data off to a lower performance tier. And then what's really important is we're continuing to optimize that data over time. And then on the right-hand side, what we're showing you is that we're able to expose all this in a native format to all those cloud data services. So here we're looking at things like Amazon Macie, Redshift, SageMaker. You can do some amazing things here, right? So I think that's the other kind of big shift that's going to happen, is that, storage in the past has been about storage. Storage now is about kind of a default action of moving to data services. So at this point, I'll go ahead and share my screen and jump into the demo. And I'll show you how this works.
Awesome. I like that point about, and we talk about this a lot, from storage management to data management. So it's definitely a theme here. So
Yeah.
let's dive in. Let's see it.
The whole point is, and again, so here I'm showing you, the Komprise UI. Again, this is a web-based UI, which means I can manage my data from anywhere in the world. And Komprise is a multi-site tool, right? So here you can see I'm managing 4 sites, and I can pick this and drill into any one of these sites. And I can also associate cloud resources with this, right? So I'm going to show you my Atlanta website or my Atlanta Komprise site, but I'm also managing Azure NetApp files and Amazon FSx within this site. You can see here that I've got some migrations running. I've got one running in Atlanta. We've got enterprise customers like Pfizer who are using, Komprise to manage literally hundreds of migrations, so they can do things like, acquisitions and divestitures. A lot of our huge enterprise customers have been doing a lot of data center consolidation over the last few years, and the ability to pool all of your resources and get this, just huge view across your data is what they find really valuable. So this is the site. Again, it's all about understanding your data. We're going to give you this high-level view of what's hot and what's cold, which lets you, make really good choices. And then if I dive into shares, I can show you how we set this up. So here in my Atlanta site, I've got I'm managing Amazon FSXN for my engineering group. I've got Azure files, Azure NetApp files, as well as on-prem Isilon, NetApp, Pure, etc. So we can manage all these. These are going to be our NAS boxes. If I wanted to add a new one, I would just click Add File Server. I can then, to the drop-down, select my platform of choice, provide my information, and then start managing it. For targets, when we talk about tiering data off, if I click this tab here I can now pick things like Amazon S3, right, and including all the way down to Glacier. So you can pick the right tier. And what's interesting here is, if you look at my AWS Corp sales setup, this also includes Amazon Snowball. So we can manage offline transfers with Amazon Snowball as well. So as I manage my data to this target source, I can use Amazon Snowball to move it there. Here I've also got Azure Blob set up, as well as GCP. And this can also include, on-premises object stores like, say, ECS, StorageGrid, Cloudian, etc. So if I want to get a deeper view of my data, right, that's the important thing, is we can use what we call Komprise Deep Analytics. So here, and this is still analyzing some data, I can look at all the data I have, right? This gives me this really deep view, and I can now start to create these granular, what we call deep analytics queries, to understand my data better. So it gives me, view results by top shares, what type of data, how old it is, who owns it, file size, et cetera. And all these, pieces of information are critical when it comes to a migration. One of the other interesting things here is we're really kind of tearing down the silos between, the storage infrastructure administrators and the owners of the data. It's really important for the customers. And if you look at customers like Pfizer, they involve the owners of the data, the scientists who are creating the data, to make decisions for their data. So the example I'm going to show here is that my engineering group in Boston would like to replicate some of their data to the cloud for analytics, or to run AI ML against it. So I can log on as that engineering user, and I can say, I only want to see data from 3 shares in Boston. This can be both NFS and SMB. I only want to see video type, and I want to make sure it belongs to my group. Once I've created this, I save this as a query. And now the storage administrators can come to the plan tab, and now they can create what we call a Komprise plan, right? So in this case, I'm going to copy or replicate data based on that query to Azure Blob, which now means that I can run AI ML against that video to identify things, right? So think about self-driving cars, think about IoT, right? It's really kind of, you get endless possibilities with what you can now do with your data. You have other choices, right? So if I click this edit button here, I could also move the data. So if I wanted to actually move it from on-prem and replace it with one of the Komprise symbolic links, or in some cases, you may want to confine data. So maybe you've got obsolete data. We'll actually move it to a special container, and then you can choose to get rid of that after a while. So today we want to talk about focus on migrations. So I'm going to come back to this tab and show you how we set this up. So on this tab, I've got an existing running migration. The way a migration works is you will select your target data, right? What do I want to move? And then my destination, where I'm going to move it to. So in this case, I am migrating from an on-premises Isilon to my Amazon FSxN in the cloud. And again, it works just the same as it does, from on-prem to on-prem or from on-cloud to cloud. It's all the same, right? And what we're doing is we're running multiple iterations. So in that first iteration, we're going to take a big chunk of data, essentially all the data that's not actively open, and we'll move it. So that first iteration is going to take a lot longer to run. And then what we'll do is these multiple iterations based on the schedule you want, such that we come down to a really small chunk of data that we can move within an iteration window. The other thing that's really important is on every move, you're going to have maybe some files that are locked. Like somebody's opening them, we won't be able to move them. We will let you know exactly what those files are. We keep what's called an iterative error log, which lets you, really dive in and understand exactly what is causing the problem, where you need to address it. And then the other part is that, Komprise is an enterprise-grade data management platform, right? If I can contrast this to things like, say, rsync or rclone, we are guaranteeing your data's integrity by running an MD5 checksum. So every file that we move over, we're running that MD5 checksum. And we're doing this high performance, right? So that's the other thing. I think if you run some of these other things and you say, wow, that's an expensive process, because we have scale out data movers, I can actually add more data movers to improve my speed. You get this enterprise, you get integrity and speed all in the same tool. So let me show you how easy this is to set up a new one. Come back to my migrations table, and I'll click add a migration. And in this case, I'm going to set up a migration from my Windows 2012 server. It's getting pretty old. And I'm going to migrate the home share, right? So this is going to be an SMB to SMB. I have the option to do the entire share or to drill into the directory. I'm just going to do the entire share here. If I click next, now it's time to pick my destination. So I'm going to pick Azure NetApp Files. Click Azure NetApp Files. I've created a home share up there that's going to match it. Here it's going to say, hey, symbolic links and unsupported attributes may not be migrated or will not be migrated. Azure NetApp Files supports those, so it will. I'm going to click next. I'll just give this a friendly name for today. We'll call it demo. And that's going to help me, especially if I'm managing hundreds of migrations. I'm going to give that a good descriptive name so that other infrastructure engineers who come on know exactly what's going on here. So we've got a few choices here, right? I can choose to preserve access time on destination. So the files that haven't been touched for 5 years, look exactly the same. And because this is SMB to SMB, I want to maintain those permissions, right? So the same permissions that come across. And for customers that are migrating from Windows on-prem to Azure, this is a really smooth experience, right? They're going to migrate within their own domain. It's going to be a really seamless experience for the data users. And here I also get to pick the destination for my audit log. Again, this is going to be this granular log of every single thing we move. So when we're doing an enterprise grade migration, we want to be able to prove and validate every chunk of data along the time. So with these choices set, I click next. It's going to give me a big summary of all the things I've set up, and I would just click start migration, and I'd be off to the races. So one of the things we didn't talk about yet is kind of some of the versatility in this platform, right? So we talked about doing NAS to NAS, right? We talked about doing NAS to object, but we can also do object to object. So now I'm going to show you our cloud migration. So this gives me the ability to migrate from S3 to S3, or from S3 to Azure, or from something like Wasabi to Amazon, or from an on-prem S3 target like Amazon ECS, EMC ECS, Dell EMC ECS, or StorageGrid to the cloud. Right, so this is another really powerful tool here. And once you go to the cloud, right, it's important to keep optimizing. So if I click on plan here, I can show you that we've got the ability to move within tiers here. So for example, I can do an archive job within Azure. Data that's not been accessed for over 8 weeks, I'll move it down to Azure Cool. And if it hasn't been touched for 6 months, I can move it down to Azure Archive. So our goal is to create this really powerful data management platform that lets you see all of your data wherever it lives, and then gives you the ability to deeply understand it, to involve not just storage users, right, but the people who own the data and know what its kind of value is. And now you've also got the power to make these really granular moves.
Hey, Steve, I like this this concept of the cold data, and also that this isn't just a a one and done kind of thing.
Exactly.
Oh, there we are. There we are.
Yeah.
That you can set a policy up based on the data temperature, if you will, and
Yeah.
then have that automatically come into your plan. Do you find that when you talk to customers, you have to kind of change their thinking about this being a one, kind of just
Exactly. I
cut
think that's,
over versus
when we say
ongoing?
that Komprise is a data management platform, we really want to make a difference or a differentiation between, the traditional migration tools that literally were, to your point, one and done, right? I would literally set this up every 3 to 5 years. I would run this thing and then I would not do it again. And I think that's part of what kind of, gave traditional storage admins a bad taste in their mouth about migrations, right? It was this thing that was scary. It was a thing that wasn't done all the time. And once you did it, you didn't want to do it again. So Komprise gives us the ability to continually optimize your data. And that's the other part that's going to save you money, right? So like, last fall, Amazon introduced Amazon Glacier instant retrieval, right? So now it's a new class of S3 storage with much lower cost. And a lot of our customers could now very quickly look at their data, understand its access, and say, all right, that is something I want to use. And Komprise, we supported it right out of the box. So it's that ability, it's that agility to constantly move things over time, right? So, if you do exactly what you did on-prem, right, where you make these choices and then you don't, you're going to pay more in the cloud than you should have, and you're not going to get the value out of your data, right? So it's a whole different way of thinking about things, right? It's really kind of tearing down silos. And again, we make it simple for you, right? We provide those tools.
Got it.
So again,
So just just this summary, I think, is helpful just to close out a really great demonstration. But I think on the left-hand side, these key points of, like you described, the analytics first,
yep.
the storage agnostic, right? Not being kind of. Let me ask you actually a bit about that because we have a couple of minutes. But
Right.
do you find that organizations still try to squeeze as much out of their existing storage platform technology, or increasingly our enterprise organizations multi-storage, multi-cloud, and that's no longer an option?
Yeah, I think in the past, once you had kind of chosen a team, you really stuck with it, right? So if you started with NetApp or you started with Isilon, you stayed with it because it was kind of hard to go after another tool, right? They give you tools to migrate from NetApp to NetApp or Isilon to Isilon.
Mm-hmm.
With an independent data management layer like Komprise, I now have the ability to do NetApp to Isilon, Isilon to NetApp, Isilon to Cumulo, on-prem or in the cloud, right? So I think that's the value. It really puts you in the driver's seat because, especially, every time you come up for a renewal, if you don't have the ability to move your data, you're kind of held, I don't want to say held hostage, but you're not in the driver's seat, right? So this ability to effectively become completely, vendor neutral with your data management layer really puts you in control. And we have customers that are doing things like, replicating, for disaster recovery from Isilon on-prem to, say, like Cumulo in Azure, right? So this is this kind of, cross-platform, cross-vendor thing that just simply wasn't possible in the past, right? It would absolutely have to be the same brand or flavor there. And it's really interesting what customers are doing, right? It's kind of freed them up to do new and exciting things.
And as you were demoing, you mentioned a lot of things, and you showed them quickly. Maybe just a couple of these points on the right-hand side about the Komprise approach. I think in particular the checksums, error logs. Like, how important are those, and is that more important now than it used to be?
I think so. I mean, one of the things I want to emphasize is, again, the scale out performance. So we can literally add more data movers, and it's elastic, right? So if I've got a big data management job or a lot of data to move from on-prem to the cloud, and I want to do it quickly, I can add a lot of these data movers. And then after that's done, and maybe I'm just doing a smaller migration going forward, I can scale those back and remove some. We also have optimized file system clients, right? So which means that we're doing more with each byte. So your traditional, NFS client, for instance, wasn't built to do these large data moves, right? It's very kind of chatty. It's essentially doing lots of little moves. Komprise, really optimizes that. It's almost like, I want to say WAN optimization, right? But we're simply doing more with each step along the way. That other part that you mentioned is about the ability to validate your data. So, if you think about, again, this is one of the things that were kind of scary for storage admins in the past is, maybe they move some data and it gets corrupted in the process. That's completely unacceptable with enterprise grade storage. The ability to do an MD5 checksum and then have an audit trail so that you can prove at every point along the way that the data you had at site A is now the same in the cloud. I think that really builds confidence, right? So that means, for a storage team that can come to maybe a business unit, line of business, and say, look, I can move your data to the cloud and we can prove that that data is exactly the same as it on-prem, right? And some of these customers may be under, regulations where this is absolutely critical, right? So if they lost data, or that they could get in trouble. And again, those iterative error logs give you the ability to quickly resolve issues along the way. It just makes it a lot easier, right? So this is really different. I think customers that have done really large traditional migrations in the past, this is going to be refreshing, right? It really takes kind of the friction and fear out of the process.
That makes sense. So just to give a plug to what's next. So first of all, if you want to learn more about Komprise Smart Data Migration, you can visit our website. Smart Data Migration is the URL for komprise.com. We've talked about the importance of taking analytics first, right? Getting out of those silos and being able to see the complete picture, understanding your data before moving your data. We've talked a lot about data mobility today, and I think that's increasingly going to be an important conversation to have in the enterprise. It's not just data management, but data mobility and having that flexibility, agility, like you talked about, Steve. And then I want to have you give a plug for Ben's upcoming webinar. So we're going to do a session on preparing for file and object data migration. And you talked a little bit about the network in your last slide. Can you just give a little bit of a preview into the kind of work Ben's been doing with some of our largest enterprise customers?
Yeah, I mean, so one, before he came to Komprise, he had amazing experience, right? He actually came from one of our largest customers. So he, lived, eat, and breathe this stuff all the time. And since he's come on and become part of our customer success team, he's been helping our customers mitigate a lot of issues. There is preparation that needs to be done ahead of time that can make this go really smooth. And customers are discovering, problems with their network or problems with their existing storage. And if they resolve those issues, things go so much smoother. So I want to this is a live webinar. This is a fantastic opportunity to get on and ask these questions. Even if you're not a Komprise customer, right? This is valuable information. I think it's going to be a really good session. I always learn something when I talk with Ben. Just really deep knowledge, great real world experience. There is a philosophy here, if you check those boxes and you get ready, and again, this is, what we built our platform to do, but yeah, he absolutely knows how to use it. It's going to be a really cool session.
And then cloud native access, you talked a bit about it, but why is that important? Why is that someone should, because that's more of okay, we've talked about preparing, we've talked about how to actually move intelligently. Now, what are the benefits of a cloud native data access once you're in the cloud?
Yeah.
What would you say
So
about
I think
that?
this is that other point about your data is now becoming independent of the storage that it lived on. And what we meant cloud native access is I can now read this, natively by, if it's on Amazon via S3, if it's in Azure via Azure Blob, all of the analytics applications, all of the AI/ML applications, right? They're built to talk these APIs. It's now exposed. So now it's not just about storing my data at a certain performance and cost level. It's how much value can I get out of my data. So I can now, run AI/ML against it. Some really interesting things become possible when you've got that cloud native access. Like you gave the term AI ready data. That's exactly what it is.
Fantastic. All right. So you can learn more at komprise.com. Today's focus, as we said, was on the left of smart data migration. We talked a little bit about tiering as part of a smart data migration strategy. You mentioned some other use cases along the way, and then smart data workflows is our latest announcement. So we'll be covering that on future webinars. So Steve, let's go back to ourselves here. Wave goodbye. Thanks, everybody. And hope you found this valuable. Look forward to working with you. Thanks, Steve.
Yep. Take care, everyone.
Bye.